So Kalour has come out with an oil-based pencil set. And I've always kind of liked the Kalour wax-based pencils. You know, they're fairly inexpensive, but they perform pretty well. Obviously not professional pencils, but I've always preferred an oil-based pencil. And so I thought, okay, well, I have got to try these. So they only come in a 72 color set at this time. And it is a hinge set, so the lid does not come off all the way like on most of their sets. Obviously the first thing you're going to see when you open it up is their color chart. And the paper's not great on these. I did test one pencil on here, and it was just pretty slick, so I didn't go through and do the rest of the color chart. Now it does have 3 trays of pencils in it, and they're a little bit tough to get out. They're your typical pretty flimsy pencil trays, and there is a decent variety of color for a 72 color set. And then the bottom tray actually has these little handles on it, so it's easier to pull out. One thing that this set has is a colorless blender pencil, as well as a colorless burnishing pencil. And I did test both of those out. As you can see, they're a bit shorter. One thing I found with both of these pencils was that they did crumble pretty easily. I also found that some of the colors, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this or not. Let's see if I can get some white behind there. But the pencils did, some colors, crumble easily when you were sharpening them. But other than that, the wood on the pencils is good. They sharpened up without much of an issue beyond those few colors that I hit where they were crumbling. Now what I found different about these than other oil-based pencil sets that I have is that they really, they just don't seem to perform like I would expect an oil-based colored pencil to. They are soft and creamy, almost to the point of being greasy and slick. So to give you an idea of their quality, I took a page from a really cheap coloring book. This is pretty bad coloring book paper, pretty slick, and you know, obviously these pictures are kind of boring and unimaginative, which is why I use them for testing colored pencils. So here you have in the green, I used their colorless blender on there with just 2 shades of green. The colorless burnisher is done on the bottom half of the blue water, and then this is just the pencils laid down. So I mean, they weren't too bad. A little bit of clumping whenever you lay them down, just the pencils themselves on this slicker paper. But they did perform pretty decent with their colorless blender and their colorless burnisher on this lower quality coloring book sheet. Next I wanted to try them out on one of the Kirby books, and I expected them to do a little better on here. Now, just so you know, I used the same pressure on here as I did on this, which is a very light pressure. And so on this page, which does, even though it's slick, it does seem to have a little more tooth than the Kirby books. You can see it made a richer color. On the Kirby book, and right here, this is just pencils. Laying down just a light, you know, with a light hand, it really didn't pick up much color. Now, if I pressed really hard, like I did right here with just the pencils, it did put down more color. I'm not sure if you can see it here, but it just got really shiny and slick and just doesn't look very good in my opinion. Now, I tried their colorless burnisher on this area and their colorless blender here on this area, and there wasn't too much of a difference between the two. on this paper. And then I decided to try a colorless marker blender on these little clouds down here, because usually, especially with an oil-based coloring pencil, you can get a really nice blending with a colorless blending marker. Not so much the case here. Bring it up closer. But even though it was, fairly light lay down of color, because again I used the same pressure across all of these 3 tests that I'm going to show you, it just, not much color went down, and the color really didn't move around hardly at all with the colorless marker blender. In fact, it caused it to get rather streaky. So that was a little disappointing. And then I grabbed a page from a coloring book that has pretty good tooth. And again, I used the exact same amount of pressure, a very light hand. And on this paper that had a little more tooth, you can see, this is the plain pencil down the middle, you can see that it actually laid down a lot more color. Their colorless blender I used on this side, and it obviously, it sort of does what it's supposed to. It really blends the colors in together. And then I used their colorless burnisher over on this side. You can see it leaves the colors a little bit brighter and more separated. And I'm going to bring that up there. So far, my opinion is that if you have a coloring book page that has decent tooth, the pencils did perform well on there. So my next test then was to take it onto good quality sketchbook paper. And quite honestly, I was pretty disappointed. This, on the bottom, I used their colorless blender with it. It's alright, not too bad. I used the colorless burnisher here, and as you can see, it caused the color to really get clumpy. So I decided, well, let's try going back over it, because this was all done with the colorless burnisher. Let's try going back over it with the marker blender and see if that will, get the color to show up better. Because obviously on this paper, I did get a little bit better coverage, just like on the coloring sheet that had more tooth. But the marker blender, it just made it worse. And it really, I was not real happy with the performance. I mean, it's not terribly bad, but it didn't do what I would expect an oil colored pencil to do. Now, as a comparison, I pulled out the set of Kalour wax-based pencils I have, and I did a similar heart to this one. Now, so that it was an even test, I used the same colorless blender and burnisher that came from the oil color pencil set. And it actually, if you can see it here in comparison, it was much richer color once it was blended. The heart itself, now the colors that I used weren't an exact match, so it is a little bit lighter in color, but you can see that when I used that colorless burnisher on the wax-based, you can still see some of the pencil strokes, because, obviously I was doing this pretty quickly. This was like, 5-6 minutes to lay this down. So you can still see the pencil strokes, but it didn't clump the color up like it did here. So my personal opinion, I'll be sticking with the Kalour wax-based if I do need to order another set in the future. And although they don't perform terribly bad, I didn't like the feel of them on good sketchbook paper, and I probably wouldn't use them again. Now, as I said, for a coloring book, if you're just using them for a coloring book and you have good quality paper coloring books that do have tooth, they performed quite well, and so I could recommend them for that. But like I said, surprisingly, they did not perform as I would have expected that they would on a high quality sketchbook paper. So hopefully, if others have seen this new set that come out, this might help you make a decision whether or not this is a set of pencils that you would like to have.